Story 1. I teach high school sex education, so I'm often in online forums with topics that would be helpful there. Once, I saw a post about a mom who walked in on her child having sex with their partner. I can't remember if her child was the male or the female in the situation, and one of them was choking the other. She mentioned that the child wasn't doing it correctly and could have harmed the partner. She asked why schools aren't teaching things like safety during certain practices and wanted to ensure other parents were aware that it wasn't being taught. I'm lucky they let me teach a kid what a condom is these days. If I brought up certain practices in class, I'd be on a news program within a week. Story 2. A guy urinated on a pregnancy test without any reason and received a positive result. Someone advised him to get checked for testicular cancer, and he was also positive for that. Story 3. Dude on Reddit anime asking for a show with 0 trees. There can't be any trees at all. None in the foreground or background. Dude didn't elaborate on why there can't be any trees. It was odd. Story 4. The post that personally affected me the most was one where the mother wrote about how her mother accidentally killed her daughter. Basically, the daughter was extremely allergic to coconut oil, but the grandmother didn't really believe it was true. The parents went out for the evening while the grandmother babysat, and she decided to brush the child's hair with coconut oil. When the daughter started to react, the grandmother gave her a large dose of an allergy medication and put her to bed. Because of the medication, she was too sleepy to alert anyone, and by the time the parents got home, it was too late. The whole post is just awful and painful to read. Story 5. Maybe not the weirdest, but I laughed so hard I cried at the pesto guy. Someone tried to make pesto but messed up at literally every step of the way. No basil, used mint, added cinnamon and Wensleydale, then complained it was too spicy. Amazing. Story 6. I remember reading one, but I can't remember what subreddit it was on, unfortunately. This person was curious about how heroin would affect him, and he made a post asking if anyone uses heroin recreationally and if they can still manage. People tried to warn him, but it didn't really work. His post history is still up, and I'm sure someone else can remember his name. He made that post, then followed up with a post talking about his experience with heroin. Each post after that just gets sadder and sadder. He became completely addicted, homeless, I believe, and eventually got off. It's just a very weird yet depressing story. Edit. Thanks to a user, I found out the name is Spontaneous H. Story 7. There was a situation where a woman wrote in that her boyfriend would not stop talking like a toddler, and it was damaging their marriage and sex life. She thought he might have trauma, a brain tumor, or something odd going on. What did it turn out to be? An elaborate bit that he concocted with his friends to win a signed baseball. He threw away his marriage for a signed baseball. There have been sadder and more disturbing posts I've read, but I often think about just how strange that guy is. The man humiliated the woman who was meant to be his life partner and acted bizarrely in public all to obtain a trinket. Story 8. There was a post about a guy living a life with his wife and kids for years, only to realize that a lamp in his house seemed off. He stared at it for days and realized that he was dreaming. He woke up on the ground after getting knocked out by a football player accidentally tackling him. Everything he dreamed only happened in a matter of seconds in real life. Story 9. The relationships post where a young woman was asking for advice because she learned that her boyfriend was putting slugs in her food. I sent it to my sister, and she still talks about that one because it was so weird. Story 10. Everything in the Agatha the Cockroach Saga or How Ops Love of Kafka. Story 11. Someone mentioned that they accidentally showed their homemade video to their boss. Too bad it got deleted, laugh out loud. Story 12. It was years ago, and I think it might have been deleted, but I still remember the time some guy came to the Ask Women subreddit to ask if women experience conscious thought processes and an independent sense of self, or if that was something only men had going on and women were essentially stimulus response non-player characters in the game of life. He phrased it much more weirdly and clumsily, but that was what he was asking. All the women were going, "Are you asking us if women think?" And he kept getting angrier, telling them they were clearly too stupid to understand what he was asking. It was incredible and illuminated so many things for me about the way some men act towards women. Story 13. There was one about a woman who thought her husband or boyfriend was drugging them because they kept feeling delirious and losing time. It ended up being bedbugs. Story 14. There was a guy in New York City whose roommate's room stunk. He finally went in there and found hundreds of empty Chinese food boxes along with a homemade sex doll stuffed with lo mein. When he told his roommate he had found it, the roommate just said he'd move out. I've never been able to find the story again, but that's probably a good thing. Story 15. My favorite is the guy who lost his leg in a motorcycle accident, convinced the hospital to let him keep it, and then invited his friends over to knowingly eat his leg. He made tacos. To this day, my favorite icebreaker is to ask people if they would participate in ethical cannibalism. Story 16. One post that almost immediately got deleted about how can I cut off someone's leg, maybe arm, without anesthesia. Does anyone remember that from a few years back? Mostly because he made like 10 different posts about it, but none of us ever figured out what was going on. Story 17. I haven't seen this one posted yet. The story about the psychopath son. The father shares the story here about their son. Eventually, he and his wife had another baby. The son attacked the baby with a knife, and the mother lost it and beat him almost to death. They had to move to a section of their house afterward where he had no access, and eventually, the son disappeared, never to be seen again. Story 18. Saw one the other day on what is this bug of a parent asking about lice on their kid's head. And the comments identified it as the sexually transmitted disease crabs. I think the user then deleted it. It was very eerie. Story 19. In 2019, a few days before Halloween and the skeleton memes, someone posted about time travelers posting memes to confuse people from the past. It included images of toilet paper, masks, and a shutdown with a virus diagram. Then in December, before Christmas, I saw a video of someone pleading that there's a virus being suppressed by the Chinese government and to be alert, along with little news articles about a mystery flu spreading. I tried going back to find the post I saved, but it's gone. Story 20. It was on a copy-paste subreddit, but it was apparently a real post about the two broken arms one. If you don't know it, search for it yourself if it's of interest. I would not recommend it. Story 21. I remember a while back I was reading posts about strange occurrences that people had experienced, and one of them was about a guy who was driving down the road or, I think, being driven by a taxi or something. Then the sky quickly turned to day for a few minutes before going back to night. When he got back home, he noticed that it was an hour ahead of what it should be on all the clocks, and everyone he knows talked about him being an hour later than what he said he would be. Only he and the taxi driver noticed what happened, and he ended the post by saying that he was looking for the driver. It's not particularly well written or anything, but the last thing he says still gives me chills thinking about it. To this day, I am missing an hour of my life. Story 22. I cannot find it, but there was a subreddit made by a guy who was clearly schizophrenic, poor chap, and he would put out loads of posts about his superpowers and his obsession with something called twisting, which was affecting people's brainwaves. Interesting insight into mental illness, and I hope he got the help he needed. Story 23. The post itself wasn't that crazy. It was about some sort of cryptocurrency that failed and lost all of its value overnight. The crazy part was the comments. So many people were threatening suicide because they felt so hopeless. There were so many depressing comments from people who were planning to retire and now have to tell their wives that their whole life savings are gone. It was a super depressing post. Story 24. Probably that one video of the woman who basically got cut in half because she was run over by a bus, and her mom was sitting down and holding her dying daughter waist up while her daughter's organs and lower half were on the ground next to her, kind of attached but also not really. Story 25. Some guy on the vegan food porn subreddit made sanguinaccio dolce, an Italian food made with pig blood, but he used his own blood instead of pig blood, apparently by giving himself a nosebleed. Honorable mention to another post where someone used semen as an egg white substitute. Story 26. A guy made a post on Reddit True Off My Chest because he was worried about his wife because she genuinely believed she could see into the future. Almost everyone in the comments was calling the original poster an asshole for not believing her. Story 27. Not as crazy as some of the ones here, but trying to decipher this post from title gore was an experience that stuck with me. Story 28. Maybe not the weirdest, but there was a post by a guy who lived in a remote area, mostly off the grid, and was posting on a prepaid phone. He talked about how badly his whole family abused him when he was younger. He also wrote about how one time he ended up in the hospital and his neighbor remodeled his house for him without asking. When he got back home, he tore out all the new flooring and other things that were changed because he didn't like them. He stopped posting when he ran out of minutes on his prepaid phone. I don't believe he has posted anything since. I tried searching for the original post but was unable to find it. Story 29. The one I think of a lot is the one where the lady was pregnant. Her husband's mother had died in childbirth, giving birth to him. He and his father were obsessed and were planning as if she, the pregnant lady, was going to die. It was all about what they would do alone with the new baby, etc. There was never an update or resolution. It was a super creepy read. I will try to find it. Edit here. Story 30. I don't know about weird, but there was the Ask Me Anything about the Ukrainian guy who was kidnapped and tortured by his uncle. I know a lot of stuff on Reddit is fake, and I have no evidence this was real, but the level of detail he went into in the comments was stomach-turning. I still think about it all the time. One of the few Reddit posts unexpected and sad enough to totally ruin my entire day. Story 31. Just saw a post on the Pokemon subreddit where someone drew Groudon and Kyogre kissing. Another weird one was where a guy wanted to know if he was cheating on his girlfriend because he was driving with his coworker and they both farted and smelled each other's farts. Story 32. I forgot the subreddit, but this guy ranted about a tiger in a zoo that he wanted to release because he felt it needed to roam free. A few days later, there was a news report about a guy in Massachusetts who climbed into a tiger cage and tried to free the tiger. He got arrested. The tiger didn't get free. Story 33. Someone on one of the Call of Duty zombie subreddits got a tattoo of the symbol of an in-game organization that had the Waffenschutzstaffel lightning bolts on it. He was criticized in the comments and came up with some of the most room temperature IQ excuses I've ever seen. Story 34. The one about the girl whose dad obtained illegal bushmeat and was feeding it to the family. And her mom said something about it not being the worst thing he had ever fed them and refused to elaborate, but the guesses were it was either the missing family cat or people or both. The girl ended up dropping a tip to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, if I remember correctly. Story 35. The carbon monoxide guy was wild, and there was another guy from camping who wanted to starve his nephew on a camping trip because the kid only ate nuggets. Story 36. Before the purge, someone mentioned a forum that was about people who were involved with their male dogs. It wasn't explicit content. It was real people in relationships with their dogs. One post argued that now that people are thinking about how awful factory farming is and going vegan, the next step would somehow be that we'd accept bestiality. They said it was going to be the next great civil rights battle, and they literally quoted Martin Luther King Jr. in the post. Story 37. Soup tubes. The original post was deleted, but it involved a boyfriend trying to convince his girlfriend to invest in his soup tube business idea. Story 38. I have a couple. The weirdest gross post I've seen on Reddit was a true off-my-chest post in which someone claimed to feel sexual attraction to electric chairs and admitted to masturbating to videos of electric chair execution scenes. The weirdest non-gross post I've seen on Reddit was an entomology post in which someone asked how to make their beetle sad because he'd been out of line. That came off as more of a joke than the electric chair post, though, so while weird, I didn't really think much of it. I just laughed and kept scrolling. Story 39. Probably the two broken arms story. The guy who broke both his arms and became sexually frustrated because he couldn't masturbate. So his mom started jerking him off, which escalated to sex. The dad also knew and supported the decision. Story 40. Redditors who inject spider eggs into their testicles so they can ejaculate spiders for Halloween. What are some tips you can give to those of us who are new, and which species feel the most euphoric crawling out? Story 41. The Redditor who, on a suggestion from another Redditor, decided to fry the large amount of uterine lining she had just menstruated. Scroll down for the magic. Story 42. I think it was some kind of story where the mother had her own son as a partner. She went to take him to college, and when she saw that he was greeting a girl, in a fit of jealousy she invited that girl to her house to eat. There, she killed the girl and her son. Honestly, it was something very grotesque for me. Story 43. Guy posted about the best man at his wedding, saying in his speech how the groom and all the groomsmen were involved with the bride in college. The post was about the groom asking if the best man was wrong for doing this. Pretty much everyone agreed the best man was wrong. I just found it weird that no one asked if there was any awkwardness, or if that's an odd way to meet your wife. Also, would you marry someone with whom you had this experience with your best friends? I just had so many unanswered questions.